My name is Asha Paulose. I'm an estate planning attorney. So happy you can make it today. I am here to discuss estate planning in what I do in terms of elder law and ways that you can protect your home. Again, this information is just for presentation matter only. So in our office, we handle three different stages of estate planning. One is the basic estate planning, power of attorney, will, healthcare proxy. And sometimes if we start at an older age, we'll do trust planning and Medicaid planning. This first stage is whenever you feel comfortable. I have people that start when they go into college because they want to make sure their parents have access to whatever they need financially and health wise. But most of the time, I have my clients come when they're at retirement age. The second stage of which I help people is through a crisis. So if there's a need for a Medicaid application, if you need to transfer funds for in the future to apply for Medicaid, there's any kind of supplemental needs trust they want to provide for anyone that's disabled or receiving government benefits, and if there's a guardianship proceeding that they're handling. And then lastly, I'll deal with estate and probate, and that's when you go to court to deal with any assets that need to be uh, retitled to the next owner. So there's a lot of court documents, any guardianship of minors in those situations, and then the distribution of everything. Typically, when somebody comes to my work in my office, I actually try to just kind of get the whole feel of what their intentions are. A lot of people just think, oh, it's about money, 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 but there's a lot of different things that we discuss. We really talk about what is appropriate for you and your family. So the best thing to do is review your assets. And if you want, it's better, I tell all my clients or potential clients that the best thing they can do before they come to me or before they go to an elder law attorney or estate planning attorney is to review all your assets. Have a piece of paper and write down everything that you own, and have a good description of it. You don't have to do exact numbers, you don't have to write down account numbers, just review them and write them down. The most important thing you can do is list the owners. There are a lot of times where you partially own it with your parent or with your sibling or child or a spouse. It's nice to know and have it written down in case anybody else needs to look at it. It's also good to know who can access it if you're not able to. If you have money to pay the bills for your home, but you're in the hospital, who has access to that account? Is there a power of attorney in place, or is there another person in the bank's named in the bank account? And again, we'll talk about what you want to happen to each specific asset when you pass away. But it would be nice to kind of know what it is now. Is there a beneficiary on some of these accounts? It's also good to consider your family dynamics. Do I have a wayward son who spends a lot of money and may not be able to handle the inheritance? Or do I have somebody that's in a bankruptcy proceeding or a divorce proceeding or is receiving government benefits for a disability? There are a lot of different issues that could come into play, and it'll be nice to kind of consider this before your estate planning is set. Especially if there's a blended family, it's nice to kind of know as an attorney what those specific family dynamics are so that we appropriately write that out in the trust or the will. We have a series of webinars this month. Today is the first one in protecting your home. I'm so excited about the rest of the month. Week 2, we talk about your financial options if you are inheriting a home. We have a financial coach coming that can kind of go through all the options. So excited about that. And then we also have 2 distinguished guests on in week 3 that will help you age at home. So there's an occupational therapist that will kind of discuss different renovations you could do within your home, small and big. And we also have I call her a declutter queen, but it's just, someone that can help you kind of downsize or uh, organize your space so it works for you. And then lastly, week 4 is just a passion of mine. It's preserving your family's memories. We'll talk about all the different ways that you can kind of um, keep your family history alive, especially when it comes to the things in your house. So for now, we're going to talk about the home. And I do this with my clients when I talk about any of their assets, but particularly their home. You want to be able to consider how you own the asset. Do you have complete ownership? Do you have joint ownership with a spouse or a sibling or a parent? Is there complete ownership with beneficiaries? Maybe do you have a trust and you own it with the beneficiary, or you have a life estate deed? And then maybe you have complete control with beneficiaries, but you don't own it. That's like a Medicaid trust. So there are a lot of things you can do for your home as you age. And every client is different. I will never kind of cookie cutter and say, this is what you need. And a lot of times they will drive what their desire is. And even against my recommendations, they'll say, actually, this is what I prefer. And I completely respect that because there are a lot of different reasons why people choose one or the other. First, you can do nothing. You can keep full control over your home, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of that. You can also gift it to your children while you're still living. Just transfer the deed over to them. You can also create something called a life estate deed, and that might be helpful to you, or an option that you can use. And then we'll talk about the 2 different kinds of trusts that you can have. So for doing nothing, you keep full control. You cannot be kicked out of your home. You have a right to live there for the rest of your life. And then, if you own it with someone else, once you pass away, they have the ability to do whatever they want with the home. There are no prerequisite plans that have been made. And so as you age, you have the freedom to sell it, use the proceeds, buy a smaller home, live in a different state, do the things that you need to do. It is an option that is used a lot, and I understand completely why people do nothing. A lot of reasons is because, and I might recommend it myself, is because they're not retired yet. They're not really sure what they want to do. And so tying them up into a trust may not be the best option for them, especially if their home might be a source of income for them in the future. So, tying it up might not be the best option. A lot of the times I have clients that state, I have worked so hard for this property. I've worked 40 years at paying this mortgage, and I want my name on this deed. And they will not, budge on that. And I understand. I understand how important it is to have property in this country, to have a deed in your name, and the backstory behind that struggle and effort and work. And so I never want to push anyone into a situation where they don't feel comfortable. So if do nothing and keep full control is the option, that's what I tell them. That's what I tell them to do. A lot of the times you're rolling the dice. And so when I say rolling the dice, you're gambling on a certain things. There are certain things that could happen, may happen, and may not happen. So you accept that as you move forward by doing nothing with the home. And that is an option for a lot of people. We can't control the future. You don't know what a surviving spouse or child can handle in the future. So, if you find that I want to give my spouse all the freedom to do whatever they want, so when I pass away, it will go directly to them. Great. But in reality, I find that a lot of people, when they um, when they're at that age and one spouse passes away, the other spouse just doesn't have the wherewithal, the capacity to handle something like keeping a house, maintaining the bills, paying the taxes, and selling it if necessary. And all of those things could have been outsourced to somebody else, but now it's all on them. And it might actually be a burden, um, even with that independence that you thought you both had, it might just be a burden on them. The most important thing that I tell people is that you're rolling the dice on probate. Probate is the process where you have to go to court and distribute the property that was owned by a deceased person and now is going to their loved ones, to their heirs. When you have assets and you pass away, with or without a will, if there are no beneficiaries listed on that. So if you have a home and a car that's not in the trust, or if you have a bank account that does not have a beneficiary, all of these things go into your probate estate. And as you get older, my goal is for you to avoid this, because I don't want you to go through, or I don't want your loved ones to go through this process. And I'll tell you why. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I'll write a will." Okay, great, but that may not be enough for you. And here's why. A will, let's say the will states, "Hey, I want to give it to my spouse, and if my spouse predeceases me, to my children." Great. So your children, after you pass away, will go to court and say, "Hey, my parent has passed away. I am here to transfer all of their assets, the house, the car, the bank account, into my name." The judge, the court will say, "Sure, no problem. You will, follow the directions in the will only after everything else is paid." So you see here, you have taxes, probate fees, and other expenses, and those will have their priority creditors, and they will be paid first before the heirs and beneficiaries are paid. So that means this will only take in effect only after all of this is paid. And that other expenses, that includes any credit card debt, any hospital debt, and the most important, Medicaid debt. Because if you do apply for Medicaid in the future, which is a large portion of the people listening to this webinar today, you may be able to apply and receive Medicaid benefits such as long-term care nursing home or aides coming to the house to take care of you. However, there is a bill that is accruing, and Medicaid has the right to recover the amount of money they spent on you. And the most popular way that they recover that bill is by going through your estate. And that is that other expense. So Medicaid's bill, whether it's 50,000 or 150,000, will be paid first before your beneficiaries. So for the example of the house, if you do nothing, your your beneficiaries, your heirs, will have to go to court. And if your home is worth, let's say, 350,000, Medicaid takes off the top. Again, you're rolling the dice, you're gambling because maybe you don't need as much Medicaid as somebody else. But I have found that when it's a significant amount, it's always a shock and surprise to the heirs, and they are left with the remainder amount for them when they thought it was a lot more. There's also a huge process when it comes to probate. As much as online it will say, 6 to 8 months, that's all. I have found that it takes well over a year to close an estate. Let's talk about the other options. Another option is to outright transfer to your children. A lot of people say this, oh, Morla, I'm going to give my children the home. I'm just going to transfer over the deed to them. And that, again, that is an option that a lot of people do. It's not something I recommend unless, certain situations I may find that that's okay, but I don't recommend it often. There's a lot of reasons. Most of it is because you're my client, not your children, and I don't know what your children's intentions are. Of course, everyone thinks, oh, my child will never kick me out of the house or do anything, and that definitely may be the case. I'm kind of just worried about who's around your children. So if there's in-laws that need help, if there are children that need assistance, they may feel that that's a priority over any obligations to your home. If there are debtors or people out there, creditors out there that your children owe money to, your home is now available to them. You do lose a lot of property tax advantages. A lot of people talk about the enhanced STAR benefits that they lose. And you disqualify from Medicaid because you gave such a large gift to your children. So if it's within over the certain amount of years, 2.5 for community Medicaid and 5 years for nursing home Medicaid, then Medicaid will not count against it. But usually people transfer to their children right when they need Medicaid, and so it really creates a real disturbance in terms of the Medicaid application. And then lastly, I talk about this a lot. When you transfer to your children, you want to provide a gift to them, a large gift, and that's so nice of you. But in reality, it may not be such a wonderful gift to your children because if they decide to sell the house after you pass away, there is a capital gains tax penalty that might be much larger than they anticipated. And I'm not an estate, I'm not a tax attorney, so I don't want to make any large assumptions of what your home would be. But I always tell people to speak to a tax accountant and understand what the penalty is so that your children understand or you understand whether or not you're actually giving a gift to your children. So you could always also do something called a life estate deed. It's a very big option that more and more people are taking. They don't want to be bombarded by a big thing like a trust, and there's a reasons for that. And they want their name on the deed. Again, it's a real issue with people that they want their name on the deed, and I understand. And so this is kind of like a happy medium between the two. If you do a life estate deed, what that means is that you are entitled to live in your home for the rest of your life. But you have given the majority interest to another party, like your children. And they can't do anything, they have no legal right until you pass away. So you get to pay the bills, the taxes, and everything. But when you pass away, instead of going through probate, it goes directly to them, which is so nice. It's a nice way to kind of directly give it to your children, avoid probate, avoid those creditors, like I said, and still have a legal right to your property. I do like this option. It doesn't have that large gift penalty, like I said, an outright transfer to the children would be. You can still qualify for Medicaid. You have a life estate deed, so Medicaid can stake a claim to a small portion of your house, but not the entirety of it. So it's nice to protect at least a small amount. There are reasons why people do not do a life estate deed. If they find that um, there's a lot of children, it's kind of difficult to put all their names on one deed. It's also difficult if you think, oh, I might sell the property and use the funds later. You might need to have that security blanket and not give up your property or control. Once you sign away a life estate deed to your heirs, to another party, probably your kids, you can't undo it. There's no real way of undoing it unless those parties are involved. And then there's um, a gamble when it comes to that. If any of your kids predecease you, then there's issues when it comes to dealing with that property. It is a good option. It's just not the most protection. What's the most protection? Well, a Medicaid asset protection trust is something that's available for everybody if they want to completely protect their home. But people are a little against kind of locking up their home so tightly. So another option is this revocable trust. And a revocable trust is exactly what it sounds like. You can revoke it at any time. So that means you have a lot more control over the assets that go in and out. So you own assets like your home, your car, your accounts. You can transfer all of that. So the owner is the trust and not you. However, you still control it. Think of it more as an account. So when, let's say you have $100 in your hand, you give it to the bank to hold on to, but you still control it and own it. That's what I feel like a revocable trust is. You're putting the assets into the revocable trust name, but you still own it. And when you pass away, it becomes completely irrevocable, and the trust, which is a document, just is distributed out like a will would be. Why do people do this? Because it doesn't really necessarily help you with Medicaid. It's not a Medicaid protection. So why do people do this? Because you avoid probate. And that's where the real trouble is, because there's a delay in receiving the assets for the beneficiaries, because creditors might come and actually take a bite out of the apple before the beneficiaries, and because it's a public setting, the revocable trust kind of removes all that. So it gives the assets directly to the beneficiaries you list. It's privately done, and you completely avoid probate. It's a nice thing to do if you have multiple assets or multiple beneficiaries and you don't want this whole production in a courtroom setting. And then lastly, you have a Medicaid asset protection trust, also an irrevocable trust, same thing. It has all those benefits that we talked about with the revocable trust, but it also has the Medicaid protection. So how does the Medicaid protection come in? A lot of people will tell me, Asha, I want to put my house into a trust. Do it now. But I have to really consider all the cons with them before they say it, because there's a lot of good stuff about it, but they have to be okay with the cons. Number one, the problem is once you put it in, you can't take it out. So if you transfer the home into the trust, there's no way of like getting it back. And so that's difficult for people because they want to kind of have that control and it's hard for them to relinquish it. Of course, in the trust, it says that you still get to live in the property, you get to live there for the rest of your life, you get to pay the taxes, the bills, everything. If you want to sell it, you can. There is all of that in the trust, but you cannot undo what you did. The other thing is there is a lot of limitations with the principle of the trust. And what I mean by that is when you sell this home, there's not much you can do with it except put the proceeds in a bank account and not touch it, or purchase a new home. That's huge. It's huge for someone, most likely their largest asset they own, to put it into a Medicaid protection trust and then not use it. It's really hard. It becomes an asset where you get to live in it, you get to enjoy the home, but you cannot, sell it unless you take the proceeds and put it into a trust account. And that trust account cannot be used for anything. So the typical situation is a widow will come to me and say, I'm all alone in this house now. We put it into a Medicaid trust, but I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to sell the house and use the money to pay a rental apartment for the rest of my life. And I have to be the bad guy and say, I'm sorry, you cannot do that. You can't use that money for your retirement or whatever because it's locked up. And the only thing that you can do is purchase another home. That's it. So you can purchase a smaller home, but the remainder of the proceeds have to go into a trust. And that the home and the trust can only be distributed out to the beneficiaries once you and your spouse pass away. So it's really, this house is protected from Medicaid, yes, but it's also protected from everybody. And that might not be an option for you. But when people come to me and say, hurry up and put it into a Medicaid trust, I have to take a beat and say, wait, let's talk about what this means. And there are a lot of times where I personally will not recommend a Medicaid trust to a family. And the biggest reason is because their liquidity is low. So they'll have not a lot of retirement income, not a lot in their checking account. So to have something as big as a house tied into a Medicaid trust, I'm worried, how they will pay their daily expenses as they move forward in life. So it's important for an elder law attorney or someone to kind of review all of your finances before you quickly shove something into a Medicaid asset protection trust. But the typical estate plan includes a will, a power of attorney, healthcare directives, and a review of all your beneficiary designations. And why do I discuss this? We're supposed to be talking about homes. I say this because if you don't put your home into a trust, well, then make sure you have a will that will have the instructions written down as to what you want to happen to your home. And if you decide to do nothing with your house now, you want to be prepared for any incapacitation. And when I say that, I mean, if you are in the hospital for a long time, who's going to pay your bills? If you are at home, but you're heavily medicated or have a dementia diagnosis or whatever the case is, you want to be able to have somebody maintain the house and keep up with the bills when you are unable to. If you are out of the country and I know this could never happen, but if there's a world pandemic and you're stuck in a country for a couple of months, it's nice to know that someone can keep up with the bills and maintain the house. And the best way to do that is to do a power of attorney. I am not recommending you add someone to your bank account. That is never a good option. The alternative would be to do a power of attorney. And that a power of attorney allows you to choose an agent to do all these things for you, but not own anything. So your agent can go into your bank account and pay the medical bills or pay the house bills, pay the taxes, but they don't own any of those funds and they can't use any of those funds for themselves. It is a powerful tool that should be used more often than it usually is. A power of attorney also assists you in maintaining all your financial accounts. You're sick of calling, being on the phone, dealing with um, people online for one little change you want to make. A power of attorney, usually your children, can make these small little changes for you without you being stuck on the phone for hours. You're delegating. That's what you're doing. And it's nice to know that, if you're not able to do something, your children and your wife can do it, or spouse can do it, or husband. I'm only saying this because a lot of clients come to me and say, oh, my children can handle it, or my sister or a spouse can handle it. And I tell them all the time, gone are the days where, you can just go to a bank and say, oh, it's my sister's account, let me just help her. No one has authority over an account, a financial account, or whatever the case may be, except the person named. Not even a spouse, not even a child. None of these come into play. Even when I was, getting a car inspected for my father-in-law, I was not able to do it because my name is not on the vehicle, and everybody knew me, but it was still difficult. They needed legal authority, which I did not have. So it's nice to have that with the power of attorney. Healthcare directives are something that I promote, especially after COVID. It's nice to know that there's somebody out there that kind of handles and makes your decisions that the hospital staff have to speak to and deal with. And then lastly, I'm always surprised as to um, the beneficiary designations of all your accounts and whether people have it or not. So I urge you to kind of look at your accounts before you even speak to an attorney to make sure those designations are in place. If you do not have beneficiaries in place, that's when probate is involved. So you might say, oh, Asha, I have a will and it says to my children evenly. The bank doesn't care about a will. The bank only cares about what the designation states. So if you state, your mom who has passed away 10 years ago, they still have her name. They're gonna keep that. You have to make sure it's up to date and what you want. There is no other document that comes into play when it comes to your beneficiary designations except the designation you state in that financial account. And then consider Medicaid planning when it comes to your home. Again, like I said, Medicaid is the process where um, the, the the care that you receive as you get older, whether they're aides that come to your home or nursing home monthly payment, that can be paid by Medicaid. This is not like the Medicaid we hear about for younger individuals, it's for senior care. It's a separate organization, it's, separate department that deals with senior long-term care. And so with that, they understand that these long-term care options are costly and Medicaid should be an option for a lot of people, but you want to protect your home. Even though Medicaid allows you most of the time to apply for Medicaid with a house, they can recover the bill, the amount of money they spent on you by putting a lien on the property later. So it's not a immediate thing like a tax consequence where they come and seize your property. It's later on in life, whether they put a lien on the property after a few years or attack you during probate. So that's where a revocable and irrevocable trust can come into play. You can also consider doing property transfer deeds and supplemental needs or burial directives. I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about my process before we go. Um, if you have not looked at my website, I urge you to do it. Kind of gives you the pricing along with a lot of different information and some blog articles. But that is the best way to reach me. There is a free 15-minute call that we can talk about, what it is that you want. There also is a strategy session that I highly recommend for people, and it's free for all attendees today. A strategy session is a time where we we sit together, we go through all your finances, and I can kind of give you a good idea of whether you can immediately be on Medicaid or you have to take a couple of small steps or larger steps. And it's nice to know before you embark on this world as you age. And a lot of clients, go through that strategy session, and I give them an opinion letter with recommendations. And I may not hear from them for a while because they have to kind of ruminate over it, and it may take months, it may take years. I completely understand. This is a long process. Once they decide they want to move forward with documents, I send them a retainer agreement online through the email. And I also send them drafts through the email where they can ask questions and make edits. We do another Zoom session where I go through every single document. I bore them to tears with my explanations, and I make sure they understand everything. And then finally, we'll schedule a at-home signing, or I try to find an office close by where you live, and so that we can come and meet. Sometimes the process takes 6 weeks. Sometimes because you're ruminating and deciding and figuring things out, it can take years. And I completely understand because it is a difficult decision to make when it comes to certain things. It is it's been such a joy of mine to kind of do all this online and to handle clients this way, especially a strategy session. I just love trying to figure out what are like the 5 basic things that can be done to help them as they move forward. I strongly recommend that. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.